The following is a Gondarar historical iceberg. The upper layers, or what we will talk about first, is what a reasonably educated inhabitant might know, and as we move on deeper, we will move into layers of ancient history, divine history, disputed history, and finally, the cosmological mysteries that the text itself does not fully explain. So far, there are 5 great ages of Gondarar: the Mythic Age, the Age of the Kings, the Age of Dragon Civilization, the Age of Vempithar, and the Age after the War. The Mythic Age is before 1 AV, which is the creation of the gods, Aelord dragons, giants, and primordial wars. The Age of the Kings / Dark Times is anywhere from 1 AV to 577 AV, which is the birth of the 12 dragons of Gondarar and the emergence of recorded history. The Age of Dragon Civilization, which is anywhere from 577 AV to 2452 AV, which features the dragons, the dragadem, kingdoms, and ancient civilizations that develop. The Age of the Vempithar is anywhere from 2452 AV to 4937 AV, which features dragon leadership, great wars, political civilizations, and scholarship. The Age after the War, which is 4938 plus, features divine dragons, ascending, shattered reality, stones of foresight, and an uncertain future. So after that, 4938 plus, this is the surface, the history that everyone knows, and it's the War of Rarith. This is the defining event of the known Gondarian history. Rarith, the god of war, unleashes his dark forces upon Gondarar. The conflict isn't merely a terrestrial war, but celestial forces collide across dimensions and reality itself becomes unstable. The planet is caught inside a cosmic struggle involving the god Rarith, Imliu, Shaza or Essi, the Vempithar, mortals, mythical creatures, and Rarith's corrupted forces. Battle produces temporal anomalies and even destroys planets elsewhere in the universe. Imliu attempts to contain Rarith. He fails. And then Rarith strikes Imliu's eye of foresight. The eye shatters. Its fragments become the stones of foresight, each carrying a portion of Imliu's divine power and capable of granting visions across time. Some fragments seek mortal hosts and create seers or oracles. The consequences? Imliu realizes that Rarith cannot simply be killed, so the two gods enter an eternal struggle, where Imliu becomes effectively occupied with holding Rarith back for eternity. Not a victory, but a containment. And that distinction is enormously important. The end of the war is also the beginning of a new age. While Imliu and Rarith become locked in an eternal conflict, Shaza or Essi uses wild magic to repair reality. She intervenes, becoming the great stabilizing force that holds the universe together after this cosmic damage. Then comes one of the most important transformations in the entire history of Gondarar. The ancient dragons ascend to godhood. In the Dragons of Gondarar, the text specifically identifies Erikril, Jelnak, Malana, Sura, the spirit of Zensir, and Krathen as ascending to godship. That means Gondarar has crossed an extraordinary threshold. Dragons have gone from mortal world powers to members of divine order. The world after 4938 isn't the same world that existed before it. 4937 AV, the death of Zensir. Immediately before the apocalypse comes the death of the great dragon of knowledge. Zensir, described as the wisest dragon of Idakin and guardian of knowledge, dies in 4937 AV. This is particularly significant because Zensir's greatest contribution wasn't conquest, it was preservation. In 2400 AV, he created the Script of Unity, the first common written system designed to bridge the cultures of Gondarar. Scholars, dwarves, gnomes, and other peoples adopted it as a shared means of recording and exchanging knowledge. So the historical sequence is beautiful. Zensir creates a system for preserving knowledge, Zensir then dies, and then the world enters an age where reality itself becomes unstable. So his death feels almost like a closing of an intellectual era. 4442 AV, Lyriel. Lyriel is an elvish sage, and she becomes prime minister of Ideken. This is significant because it demonstrates how deeply the ancient races have become embedded in political institutions. She isn't simply a mystical elf living in an ancient forest. She is a political leader. Her family also provides a bridge into older wars her grandparents lived during the Great Conflict around 2500 AV. 3211, in the Age of the Vemputhar, Erikrel and the Undead. A devastating conflict erupts in the continent associated with Erikrel, described as the Purple Dragon. Undead forces wage war against the hyena folk, sorcerers, and necromancers. Erikrel's own story places him in the boundary of the corrupted wasteland of Zudin, where he commands dragon knights against vampires. He possesses an extraordinary transformation, the armored dragon warrior. Erikrel transforms himself and fights the vampire forces, eventually defeating the vampire lord. This is important because it establishes Erikrel as more than a dragon. He is a warrior guardian. That becomes relevant later when he ascends to godhood. 2678, in the Age of the Vemputhar, the Blackclaw occupation. The Blackclaw clan, described as desert orcs, take control of the peaceful kingdom of Ernalin in Tigrea. Princess Arya responds by assembling a mix of adventuring parties, including herself as an elf, Gath, who is a dragonfolk, Marcus, a human, Thorn, a dwarf, and Kari, a halfling. They fight hyena folk, ogres, lizard folk, and orcs, and eventually restore the kingdom. This is one of the most important historical precedents because it shows a mixed race adventuring as not being foreign to Gondarar. It is part of the world's historical tradition. 2644, in the Age of the Vemputhar, Malana and the Werebeasts. Werebeasts established settlement in Ariobris under the rule of Malana the Pink Dragon. Unlike the fearful or hostile treatment they receive elsewhere, Malana gives them acceptance and protection. This establishes a crucial piece of Malana's identity. She is a dragon who uses power to protect those society considers monstrous. Later, Malana becomes one of the dragons who ascends to godhood, so her divine identity isn't merely dragon goddess, it has a history: protector, ruler, peacemaker, and divine guardian. 2584, in the Age of the Vemputhar, Makath. Makath meets his death at the hands of Selros, who disguises himself as a lion folk warrior. Rarith becomes interested in this confrontation and challenges Selros. This is another example of an important Gondorian principle. The gods don't merely watch history, they enter it. They disguise themselves, they kill, they challenge one another, they manipulate mortal events. So the boundary between mythology and ordinary history is therefore extremely thin. 2566 AV, the Cult of Rarith. Dark mages establish a public cult dedicated to Rarith in Verush. This is enormously important in retrospect. Rarith's evil isn't merely ancient mythology. His worship exists in mortal civilization. People actively choose him. They build institutions around him. His influence becomes religious, political, and magical. 2561 AV, the Fall of Crathin. This is one of the great tragedies of Gondarar. The elves and fae defeat the Dragodem, previously known as Gorum Rakavi. Crathin is killed by the warrior wizard Ozarin, who wields the flaming sword Irorvarax. Hundreds of thousands of people flee into neighboring lands. But Crathin's death is especially significant because of what he represented. Crathin had become the guardian and leader of the Dragodem. His intervention saved them from the destruction, and the Dragodem pledged themselves to him. He promised to protect and guide them. So his death isn't simply a dragon dies, it is a civilization loses its protector. And centuries later, that dead dragon becomes a god. That gives Crathan's ascension enormous emotional and political weight. 2500 AV, the War of Orin. Dragodem allies with humans against elves and fae in Orin. This is a very important detail. It tells us that the historical alliances of Gondarar aren't cleanly divided into humans good, elves are good, Dragodem bad, or anything similar. The factions change. Humans have fought alongside Dragodem. Elves have fought against them. Fae have joined elves. Different races can become allies or enemies depending on the historical moment. 2456 AV, the Zorgoth Crisis. In Vigish, the orange dragon Zorgoth has terrorized the kingdom for centuries. A group led by lionfolk warrior Lirith sets out to defeat him. Humans, elves, and dwarves join the effort. Again, this adventuring party includes cultural intersection. 2453 AV, Telkur. Construction begins on Telkur in Cryaxa. This becomes part of the developing civilization of the region. 2452 AV, the Vempithar become political. This is a foundational event. The Dragodem throughout Gondarar acknowledge the authority and leadership of the Vempithar. The Vempithar subsequently hold council. The first legal codes are written. This transforms dragonkind from simply being a collection of powerful creatures into something resembling a political institution. And this creates an important question. What exactly gave the Vempithar their authority? Was it age, power, divine appointment, an ancient covenant, the support of the Dragodem? The manuscript does not completely resolve this. 2400 AV, the Script of Unity. Zensir creates the Script of Unity. This is perhaps the most quietly important event in Gondarar's history. It allows histories to be preserved, cultures to communicate, scholars to exchange ideas, trade to expand, magical knowledge to circulate. Zensir's script incorporates influences from different cultures rather than simply replacing them. That makes it more than an alphabet. It's a civilizational technology. 1856 AV, Cahagria. The dwarves establish Cahagria amidst the frozen peaks of the Parafel Mountains in Oshish. This represents the emergence of one of the major dwarven centers. Dwarves' history also becomes associated with elemental stormkin. 1771 AV, the Dragodem Elf War. War breaks out between the Dragodem and elves in the southern expanse of Calaran. This is one of the major early conflicts that eventually feeds into the later struggle over Dragodem civilization and dragon authority. It also gives historical context as to why some elven powers become deeply hostile to dragons and their descendants. 1728 AV, Darava and the Gnomes. The golden dragon Darava commands armored gnomes against goblins in the southeastern mountains. The gnomes use catapults, crossbows, and rudimentary siege engines. They win. They take control of the eastern mountains. This becomes the foundation of the future of Clockwork City. This is a particularly useful historical turning point because it shows technology developing from warfare into civilization. 1 AV, the 12 dragons are born. This is where recorded Gondararian chronology begins. The 12 dragons who would eventually become planetary leaders are born. The manuscript also calls 1 through 57 AV the Age of the Kings, or the Dark Times. This period is the first major recorded age. Yet the irony is striking. The timeline begins with the birth of the dragons, who will eventually dominate the history of Gondarar. Before 1 AV, the Aelorian Age. Now we leave the ordinary history. The ancient dawning age predates recorded chronology by thousands of uncounted years. The Aelor dragons and the Aelor giants fight for centuries. This is not civilization in the familiar sense. It is an age of titans, primordial dragons, elemental powers, divine creation, and enormous geological and magical conflicts. The world itself is being established. The Aelor War. This is where Gondarar acquires its oldest scar. Aelor dragons and Aelor giants fight. Some become corrupted under Rarith's influence, others remain untainted. The force of balance eventually defeat or repel the corrupted powers and confine the corruption to Zudin. This makes Zudin much more than a dangerous place. It is essentially a historical wound in the planet. The landscape exists because something went terribly wrong in primordial history. The creation of the elves. Shaza, or Essie, creates celestial offspring and sends them toward Gondarar. They become the elves. They are given physical bodies but retain a special connection to their divine source. Their bodies eventually die, but their essence return to Shaza, from whom they are reborn as elves. This is one of the most important differences between elves and humans. For an elf, death is not simply life and then death. It is closer to life, return, rebirth. That should radically affect elven culture. Rarith corrupts the oceans. This is perhaps the first great ecological catastrophe. Rarith touches the pristine ocean. His corruption spreads throughout the water. It produces grotesque creatures including Sarplios, Tabalak, and Vereparax, and also various land-sea hybrids. Forests burn, rivers become poisonous, the skies darken, the planet itself is described as suffering wounds from the corruption. So monsters in Gondarar aren't always simply evolutionary accidents. Some are literally historical consequences of divine hatred. Amu's request. Before the great conflict with Rarith, Amu asks for a realm of darkness. Imliu creates Krekol Sirium, a realm of eternal darkness. But Rarith becomes jealous of the relationship between Imliu and Hara. His jealousy evolves into ambition. He decides he will conquer Krekol Sirium rather than merely request a realm. This is the beginning of the central cosmic tragedy. Rarith vs. Amu. Rarith challenges Amu. They fight for eons. Eventually, Rarith cuts Amu in half. Amu becomes Phoslios, the noble and compassionate aspect, and Bausmus, the dark, primal aspect. Phoslios escapes to Spirination, while Bausmos remains in darkness and is chained by Rarith. Rarith then claims control of Krekol Sirium. The first great divine fracture. This is deeper than simply God A defeats God B. The mythology suggests that a divine being can physically and spiritually be divided by violence. Amu's identity becomes two beings. That means the gods aren't necessarily immutable. They can fracture, transform, lose aspects of themselves, gain new identities, and perhaps be changed by their experiences. This becomes very important when we eventually ask what exactly happened to Imliu when Rarith destroyed his eye. The creation of Nendieth. Imliu, god of time and change, leads the divine beings in the creation of the universe. Nendieth is formed as a vast cosmic structure containing many realms. Gondarar is one planet within this enormous universe. The cosmology includes Spirination, the material plane, the ethereal plane, elemental planes, astral plane, Krekol Sirium, Sivavule, infinite material plane, magical infinite library, and shadow realm. This is where the setting stops being merely planetary fantasy. Gondarar is a cosmic setting. We talked about this in previous videos, but I'll just briefly go over the creation of the planes again. Spirination is a celestial sanctuary of the gods. The ethereal plane is a spiritual realm where material and spiritual boundaries blur. Elemental planes earth, wind, fire, and water. Astral plane, a realm of thought, consciousness, memories, and possibility. Civivule, a boundless sea of mystical energy connecting realms and carrying the essence of creation. Infinite material plane, home of the magical infinite library, where every thought, word, and creation known is supposedly recorded. Cracosirium, realm of eternal darkness. Shadow realm, a parallel dimension to Gondarar full of twisted reflections and malevolent creatures. And importantly, even Imliu doesn't fully understand the Shadow realm. That is the bottom of the iceberg. The Shadow realm, the deepest known mystery. This is where Gondarar's history stops becoming history and becomes cosmic mystery. The Shadow realm is parallel to Gondarar, permanently dark, populated by malevolent beings and filled with twisted reflections, ruled by ancient horrors, mysterious even to Imliu. The manuscript doesn't tell us where it came from, it doesn't tell us who created it, it doesn't tell us whether it is older than Gondarar, it doesn't tell us whether its inhabitants are copies, originals, parasites, alternatives, or something else, and therefore, the Shadow Realm is the perfect bottom of the iceberg. So here are some levels of knowledge that a person may know having lived in this universe. So level 1 is common knowledge, and these are things that an educated person would reasonably know, that Gondarar exists within Nendiath, gods exist, dragons exist, the Vemputhar once ruled, protected the world, the script of unity exists, elves, humans, dwarves, gnomes, dragadem, and many other peoples coexist. Zudin is dangerous. Rareth is the god of war. The War of Rareth happened. Zensir died. Some ancient dragons became gods. The world survived the Great War. Level 2 is educated history, things historians, priests, and scholars may know. The 12 dragons were born in 1 AV. The Age of the Kings lasted from 1 AV to 577 AV. Darava helped establish the Gnomish Eastern Mountain Civilization. The dwarves established Kahagria. The Dragadem fought elves. The Vemputhar gained authority over the Dragadem. The script of unity was created in 2400 AV. Krathen became guardian of the Dragodem. Krathen eventually died. Malana protected werebeasts. Erikril fought undead and vampires. Lyriel became Prime Minister of Idakin. Zensir died at 4937. And the War of Rareth happened in 4938. Level 3 is ancient history, things that scholars argue about. The Aelor dragons, the Aelor giants, the first elemental titans, the primordial war, the origin of Zudin, the precise history of the 12, the original purpose of the Vemputhar, the true age of the dragons, the first civilizations, the earliest mortal contact with the gods, and what really happened during the earliest age of the kings. Level 4 is divine history, knowledge mostly belonging to priests, gods, dragons, and exceptionally powerful mages. Imliu created and organized Nendiath. Shaza created Civivule. Imliu created Cricosirium for Amu. Amu was divided by Rareth. Fauslios and Bausmus emerged from him. Rareth enslaved Bausmus. Rareth corrupted Gondarar. The gods directly shaped mortal races. Elves are connected directly to Shaza. Gods can interact with moral history, and divine beings can be transformed. Level 5 is the War of Rareth, the catastrophe that changed everything. Rarith attacks Gondarar, celestial forces enter the conflict, reality begins breaking, planets are destroyed, Imliu tries to contain Rarith, Rarith destroys the Eye of Foresight, stones of foresight scatter, seers receive fragments, Imliu and Rarith become internally locked together, Shaza repairs reality with wild magic and stabilizes the universe. Ancient dragons ascend to godhood. Level 6, the Stones of Foresight. This is where history becomes dangerous. The stones are fragments of Imliu's destroyed eye, and they can reveal past, present, future possibilities. Some find mortal hosts. That means somewhere in the universe, there are people who may possess pieces of the god of time, and that means someone may know what happens next. Level 7, the gods are not all-powerful. This is one of the biggest implications. Imliu doesn't understand the Shadow Realm. Rarith can't defeat Imliu. Imliu can't defeat Rarith. Amu can be divided. Reality can be damaged. The universe can require Shaza/Essie to physically hold it together. Therefore, the gods are immensely powerful, but they are not omnipotent. This is excellent for the storytelling and means there are things that even gods fear. Level 8, the Shadow Realm. We don't know the origin, the creator, the purpose, the true inhabitants, the relationship to Gondarar, the relationship to time, relationship to death, and relationship to magic. The text calls it a parallel dimension, and that's not enough information to tell us what it really is. Level 9, outside of Nendieth. The manuscripts establish that Nendieth contains multiple solar systems and that the wider universe is populated by other planets. The appendix describes Alpha Aldaba, containing Gondarar, Sember, Sathan, Gradhadar, Temgol, Venakal, and Zendgar. Beta Keed was once populated and is now barren. Delta Mintica, shattered worlds and unexplained empty orbits. Gamma Arcab, a system containing microscopic life, a shattered planet, a Terran world, and a gas giant. This means Gondarar isn't the only world with history. There are dead civilizations elsewhere. There are unexplored systems, there are shattered planets, there are worlds whose inhabitants vanished. This is a gigantic hook for any explorer. Level 10 is the true bottom, and here we have to be honest about what the text does not establish. We don't know what existed before the gods. We don't know where the gods themselves came from. We don't know whether Nendieth is the first universe. We don't know whether the Shadow Realm predates Gondarar. We don't know whether the universe has existed and been destroyed or recreated. We don't know whether Imliu can actually lose his eternal battle with Rarith. We don't know what happens if Imliu wins. We don't know what happens if Rarath wins. We don't know whether the Stones of Foresight can be reunited. We don't know what happens if they are. And perhaps the most important question is, who made the universe that made the gods? The script does not answer that. So I just like to do the history of Gondarar in one continuous story. If you strip away all the dates and tell the history as one great myth, it looks like this. Before history, there is the divine order. Imliu, Hara, Shaza, Rarith, Amu, and other divine beings exist before the mortal civilizations. Imliu, master of time and change, leads the creation of Nendieth. The gods fashion the cosmos. Gondarar emerges as one of its worlds. Shaza creates the elves. The primordial powers create the Aelor dragons and Aelor giants. The universe appears to be entering an age of creation and balance. Then Rarith becomes jealous. His envy becomes hatred. His hatred becomes ambition. He corrupts the ocean of Gondarar, creating monstrous life and wounding the planet. He desires domination. Meanwhile, Amu asks Imliu for a realm of darkness. Imliu creates Krakol Sirium. Rarith challenges Amu. They fight for eons. Rarith cuts Amu apart. Foslios and Bausmus emerge. Foslios escapes. Bausmus is imprisoned. Rarith takes Krakol Sirium. Meanwhile, the primordial wars of dragons and giants ravage Gondarar. The corrupted powers are eventually driven into Zudin. The world survives. Then the 12 dragons are born. The Age of the Kings begin. For centuries, civilization grows. Gnomes wage wars against goblins. Dwarves establish Kahagria. Dragadem fight elves. Dragons intervene in mortal politics. The Vempathar emerge as leaders. The script of unity is created. Civilization becomes increasingly interconnected. But the ancient conflicts never truly disappear. Krathen protects the Dragadem. Malana protects the werebeasts. Arakrel defends Trumorn. Darava aids the gnomes. Zensir becomes guardian of knowledge. The dragons become more than beasts. They become historical actors. Then the old revelries return. Humans ally with Dragadem, elves and fae oppose them. Krathen falls. Dark cults begin worshipping Rarith. Gods interfere directly with mortal affairs. Undead armies rise. Kingdoms fall. Dragons become tyrants. Heroes rise against them. The world continues until finally Zensir dies and then Rarath comes. The War of Rarath tears the boundary between the mortal and divine worlds. The sky itself becomes a battlefield. Time breaks. Planets shatter. Ymliu fights Rarith. Rarith destroys the Eye of Foresight. The Stones of Foresight scatter across existence. Ymliu realizes the only way to stop Rarith is to fight him forever, and Shaza repairs the damaged universe, holds reality together. The ancient dragons ascend. The universe survives, but does not return to what it was because now the god of time is trapped in an eternal battle. Pieces of his foresight are scattered throughout existence. New dragon gods have entered the divine order and the universe bears scars. And somewhere beyond the planet, the known planes, the Shadow Realm remains, still watching. And if you're still watching and listening, thanks for dropping by, and I will see you on the next episode. May the magic of Gondarar live on.